Mike, you want to take it? Al, you want to come over here? Chris, you want to come over here? Mike Johnson and Angela. Hap, John, Javon over here. Angela over here, Chris. Angela over here. Yeah, and Mike Johnson over here. Yeah, Mike, right here. This is Al's up there and Javon over there. Okay. Right here. I'll take it. Okay. All right, we're going to move right into this. George Brown, Rachel Noel, Walter Webb, Roy Tan, Regis Croft, Aaron Taylor, Rosemary Marshall, Paul Hamilton, William Webb, Odell Bader, Elvin Conway, Benny Miller, Sharon Bailey, Hiawatha Davis, Sam Williams, both Penfield Tate, Jr. and Senior, Ben Clark, Edna Mosley, King Trumbull, Bill Roberts, Gloria Holiday, Omar Blair. These folks stand on the shoulders of those black elected officials before us. That's what we've asked these folks to do, and I'm not sure if this has ever happened before, from a historical perspective, to have this many black elected officials in the room at one time talking about issues that impact our community. The questions that were posed to our elected officials: in your sphere of politics, what are the policies and programs that currently address the disparities identified in the Losing Ground report? Are there other policies and programs you would propose? And what will your office do in the future to assist in addressing the identified disparities? And are you willing to work in partnership with the Colorado Black Roundtable to help the African American community in Colorado regain the ground that they've lost? The question is first proposed to our mayor, Michael Hancock.
Thank you, John, and thank you to all of you for giving up time on your Saturday to be here. I think it's a very timely and appropriate conversation for us as a community. It has been for quite some time, actually. I want to acknowledge the sponsors who helped put this on, certainly to our honorable chairs, the Honorable Gloria Tanner, as well as the great senator. Both of them were great senators of the state of Colorado, certainly Senator Regis Croft. I know that we would not, none of us up here can move forward without ever thinking about the role that Senators Tanner and Groff, as well as the other elected officials that John named. All of us, I can tell you, I met every one of those people that he named. Every one of them gave time and simply said, he's not heavy, I can help lift you and show you what it means to be a servant. So we owe a great deal of gratitude to our pioneers who came before us. Listen, I can sit here today and I can talk about the fact that since coming to office in July of 2011, we've created 15,000 jobs in the city of Denver. 1,000 new businesses have started in the city of Denver. We've begun to narrow the achievement gap in the city and county of Denver. There were 71,000 kids in Denver public schools when I was elected. Today, there are 84,000 kids coming back to the city public school system. Record number. I can tell you that we've been able to invest some $73 million since I took the oath of office in our children in this city. $73 million. Trying to create really that circle of care and circle of opportunity for our young people. 2,500 kids went to work this past summer through the SMARE Summer Youth Employment Program. When I came into office, 200 kids were going to work during the Summer Youth Employment Program. So we're making investments where we have. When I came into office, young people had to pay a membership fee, about $30 a year, to go to our rec centers and our pools. Those of us who grew up up in the city know that rec centers and pools are the center of the heartbeat of our city and have always been. And unfortunately, we created an artificial barrier by saying you must pay a membership, so kids simply didn't go. Today, I can tell you that thanks to these members of City Council who sit up here with me today, we removed that barrier and we created the My Denver Card free access to Denver's rec centers and pools. We thought in March when we launched the program, well over 30,000 kids in the city would get So I can talk about all those good things, and we're going to continue to focus on education. We're going to continue to focus on economic development, economic opportunity. We're going to continue to focus on housing issues. My 2014 budget calls for a $3 million initial investment to begin to build more affordable, accessible housing in the city and county of Denver. My budget also continues to call for the hiring of more police officers in Denver, particularly in our growing neighborhoods in the city. But I want to say something a little different. Good things are happening in the city. I sat for 2 long sessions with the reporters and the researchers of Losing Ground. And I reflected on my times with the Urban League and that great venerable movement. And I reflected on my time, 8 years on City Council and now 2 years as mayor. And a lot of the same issues we were trying to address in the Urban League and City Council, we're still trying to address today. The same issues that Senator Tanner and Senator Groff talked about, John Benny talked about when I was just a knee-high to his ankle. And we were running back and forth to Red Shoe. We had been in these sessions before. And the one thing that I said to those interviewers that we seem to not want to address more candidly is that we as an African American community have lost the Big Papa symbol in our community. And what I mean by that is when we were growing up, my mother's and my mother's mother talked about no matter how difficult things got in the house or even in the job, Big Papa never lost it, left his kids. And the fact that the breakdown of our family correlates with the widening of the gaps is not understated. And if we are going to be honest about addressing these issues, the mayor can address them. I can go and talk about equality and equity and opportunity and economics and education. Councilman Brooks can talk about opening rec centers. The state legislature can say we're going to bring more MWBE programs and ACBD programs to bear. But as an African American community, we don't get serious about black men staying in their families, we will never be enough. You know, Mary Louise and I talk all the time. We got married at 23 years old. We've been married this past July 20 years. And let me first tell you, as my mama said, life ain't been no crystal stair. But the one thing we were hell-bent on, that we were going to stay together for these children and make sure they were raised in a healthy, loving environment. That's why when we sent our young son last week to Atlanta Institute of Music and walked away and said, we've done the best we can, it's on you now. It was that fighting through difficult, challenging times, that Big Papa syndrome. No matter what went down, I'm still your daddy, and I'm gonna get you through this. And I just want us to be honest about the fact that we have this conversation as elected officials. We will never forget the fact we're African American. Every morning we wake up, we're reminded. And oftentimes the media reminds us too. But what we cannot do, as much as we speak from these holy pulpits, is to encourage our families to stay together so that our children grow up healthier in healthier environments and have better opportunities. And it's proven time and time again, families that pray together, stay together, kids get better and do better. So I just want to put that on the table. And that's just good talk. That's not rose-colored conversation. This is real family conversation. It's about the family. And if you go back and look at these numbers and you begin to see the regression, you begin to see the escalation of single parenthood that occurs throughout the community. Thank you.
it was on the night before coming in here, sets the mood and sets the tone that we can't play anymore. We can't just have these conversations and walk out of here and feel all good. So I'm going to cut to the chase and just say the reality. The reality is we can't have these lofty policy macro visions because oftentimes they don't get to the east side of Denver and they go to I'm witnessing that firsthand. For example, with our MWBE goals, right, which is a great program, we see that there's a disparity within our own African American community within those goals. So even our best intentions sometimes even fall short. And so, from a city council perspective, I get the opportunity to both link up and be a part of the macro vision of what we're doing in the city, which our mayor highlighted. And then put together micro goals that impact our community. For example, 80205 is one of the highest unemployment and prison reentry rates in the city. And so what we did off of the mayor's summer jobs program is we did a program for 30 young people who had misdemeanors and felonies to hire jobs, and they had to live within 80205. And so we had 30 folks, and we talked about that. And everyone said, you just had 30 folks, but they were from our community, and they stayed in their job the whole summer. The macro opportunity that I see coming for Northeast Denver is probably the biggest investment, the most strategic focus from the mayor's office, and it's this Northeast Denver collaborative that we're doing, which focuses on Brighton Boulevard and I-70, and it's going to include most of Northeast Denver. We're going to invest, CDOT is going to invest $2.4 billion in I-70. Our rail line is going to invest $1.3 billion, and this is all in the community. We're redoing our stock show. All of this is going to be money in our community. We need to have a focused plan that we put together that impacts individuals from our community. And so one of the things that I want to propose is whether these contractors who are coming on board to work, whether it be Keelan, whether it be all these construction contractors, that they would specifically come and do a forum like this for us and tell us all the different job opportunities. And since you are in our community and you're putting this together, how are you going to implement us within this economic development plan that you're working on? I know all of us have some amazing ideas, so I'm going to pass it on. But I'll just say this. My mother, and I tell this story all the time, my mother was the first African-American born in Lake Village, Arkansas, in the hospital. They put her in a cage so she wouldn't contaminate the rest of the black babies. She grew up in that era of the Little Rock Nine, but she grew up with a lot of anger, and she became a Panther in Chicago. She grew up as a Panther in Chicago, and one of the things she said after she got her PhD from UCLA in education, she said, the movement lost its power when we got jobs. The movement lost its power when we got educated. And as I'm looking at all of this data and all of this information, one of the things that I want to remind us and all these successful folks up here and all these successful folks in the audience is, this is on us. We cannot forget. We cannot move on. We cannot move up. In 2010 census, the fastest growing African-American county, you guys know what that is coming. Now, I'm a rebellious and I'm always promote doing it, but I just think that that's interesting. And so I think that's a question that we have as a community have to grapple with. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you all for coming out tonight, today. And I would like to, I will be brief. I know there's a lot of good ideas, and I appreciate the Mayor Alice talking about the investment that the city has made our children today don't see us. And I would ask you all, if you've never heard of Northeast Denver Leadership Week, to write that down and Google it. It's a program I started 2 years ago where we take kids from Venture Prep High School all the way out to Green Valley Ranch. We take them from for a week in the summer, they're freshman and senior, and I take them around so they can meet the mayor, they can meet Senator Johnson. Happy Haynes spoke to my students, Larry Shea has spoken to my students, because the students don't see us. They're never going to believe they can accomplish the things that we can accomplish. So that is a program that we've done for 3 years now, and that can be expanded to district-wide, citywide. I appreciate the mayor and all the people that have spoken to our students, because they're students, around kids, that they know you can be us and you can be better than us, right? I think that's another thing that we can do. And lastly, as we talk about education, I had the opportunity, being a veteran, to go back and get my master's degree when I graduated in May. And the Army paid for it, but I saw the cost of this degree. And I just thought, higher education is so expensive. And one of the things that I did is I had the opportunity to get to know Nate Easley very well. He worked for Denver Scholarship Foundation. A program since 2007 has taken 3,000 different kids and have given them the opportunity to go to college. And I pressed really hard this summer, unsuccessfully, to try to get a ballot measure so that we can expand Denver Scholarship. So if you are and I think that is something that will hopefully continue to push for, so that we can, if we can say as a city that you are a successful Denver graduate and you have the opportunity to go to college, what that would say as a city of Denver and how that we can help our students, I just think would be something that could continue to put it on the map. And those are the things that I hope we will continue to expand and be successful. Thank you all very much.
Mike Johnson, thanks so much for having me. And I want to thank John and Sharon again for putting this on. I think, like many folks, woke up this morning with a bit of a broken heart after last night. And I think it felt a little bit like those days when you wake up and you feel broken and you're so excited to go to church. Because you know you need somebody to help put you back together again. And I felt like this morning, knowing that this event was happening, I think helped all of us get up to get going, to know we had people come together to talk about some real plans and some real strategies moving forward. So I want to thank Pastor Hughes, who was there last night, Reverend Demmer, and Quincy Shannon was here somewhere. It was a fantastic force for peace last night. And so I want to thank all those people who were at the Halloween last night when we needed you most. I just want to talk about two big ideas quickly that I think are going to have the chance to make a big, big impact. And one is when you talk about, and talked a little bit earlier, Sharon did, about the impacts of institutional racism and institutional discrimination and institutional lack of opportunity. And one of the places that we have seen that more powerful than any place is in our school funding formula, is in the way that this state has historically funded kids and funded schools. And if you want to know more, I can talk a lot more about it. What we have done is we have built a system that actually puts more and more resources into kids that already have all the resources and puts fewer and fewer resources into kids that need it the most. And so what we are undertaking to do this November on the ballot, Amendment 66, is to finally say it is time for our school finance system to match our values, and to make sure that every child in this state has the resources that she needs, regardless of what her needs are. And for us, that means things like finally investing in full-day kindergarten for every single child in the state. Finally investing in high-quality early childhood education for every 3 to 4-year-old we know is likely to enter first grade, not yet ready to read. Those things alone close the achievement gap by more than 33 months before a 6-year-old girl walks into first grade. We talk about making it possible for the first time to offer schools and districts who want it extended school days and school years, up to 20 additional days of school per year, which we know is the time when our kids make the most dramatic slide. You talk about the summer learning loss, the summer slide. Those are the kids who, for those 6 weeks of summertime, are going to school. They're home babysitting little brothers and little sisters so mom can go to work. If you want to close those gaps, we've got to start by making investments in those kids who need us to stand up and stand in the gap for them, as the mayor says. And so this opportunity to invest in great teachers and great leaders in the schools where we need them, to make sure that the dollars that exist in our system go directly to the kids that are coming to us from families in poverty, that are coming to us from families who are speaking English as a second language, and make sure the teachers and the schools and the families have the resources they're going to need to finally be successful. I think this November's ballot gives us a historic opportunity to say it's time for us to invest in the kids that rely on us the most. I think we have not done that yet, but this is our chance to do it. The second, I think, and equally important, is, as the statistic that was mentioned before, which is the most astonishing to me always. I started my teaching career teaching in Mississippi Delta, and I would come home and folks would say, "Man, it must be crazy out there in the Delta." Like, I can't imagine how terrible the opportunity must be for the kids you're working with. And then you go back to them that the reality is the day that I took office in this state, you had a worse chance of being a black and brown kid sitting in this auditorium of ever graduating from college than you had growing up anywhere in Mississippi, or anywhere in Alabama, or anywhere in Tennessee or Georgia or Texas. That is an absolute embarrassment for our state. But to do that means not only fundamentally changing K-12, it means when our kids graduate from high school, ready to go on to college, that they actually have a chance to go because it's affordable. For our Latino families, for a long time, that's meant passing the asset bill that we passed last year, which said any kid, a valedictorian of Montbello High School or Manual High School, whether undocumented or not, if they've done the work and earned the opportunity, they ought to be able to go to college. But most importantly, now it's time for us to deliver the promise that college is actually affordable. Because you've got families who've responsibly been putting money away since their kids were 4, 5, or 6. When tuition rates are going up 15% a year, it doesn't matter how much savings you put in, you can't keep track of it. And so that's why this year we're also going to push to make a historic investment into college affordability, and particularly college affordability for our kids who we know are coming from low-income families who've got to fight to get their way in. And so I think, for me, this is about fighting for educational opportunity. In this recession over the last 3 years, folks with college degrees, the unemployment rate never rose above 6%. You want a way to make sure our kids and our grandkids have a great chance of surviving recessions and surviving whatever the economy throws at them, we got to make sure they get degrees after high school. 70% of the new jobs in this state over the next 5 or 10 years are going to require some sort of post-secondary training. For my money, that means I want our kids in that training. And so, when I come out of last night and wake up this morning, it's about what are we as a community going to do to make sure that we are sending more of our kids, and particularly more of our young men, towards colleges and towards careers, and not towards cages and coffins, because we've done far too much.
We need you to contact all of your legislators in the House and in the Senate which they can buy a home. And so we will be doing some legislation to help people, particularly minorities who have been affected by this, to rebuild and have access to their credit. We will be looking at a piece of legislation called Colorado Employment First. This piece of legislation and this law is currently existing in 26 counties of the 64 here in the state of Colorado. And this is tied to the SNAP program and food assistance programs. And currently, if you are food assistance, you need to participate in this program to ensure you continue to get your food assistance. And if you do not, you are not eligible for food assistance. And this program will give education, it will give training, and get people back on track into employment. We will also be looking at a bill to increase the state minimum wage. We've heard a lot in the news. There's a lot of low-paying jobs. Service type jobs. These jobs right now are only paid a minimum of $7.78 an hour. We will push to increase those service jobs and that minimum wage so that people can make a living on these service jobs. We will continue to work with the banking industry and lenders to ensure that we are giving homeowners an opportunity to understand home buying. They will continue to have education. We will continue to help with modification and home preservation events and with the mortgage foreclosure crisis that has occurred in Colorado. So I just want to say thank you. That is a preview of our agenda. We will have more that we will preview to you, but I really want to say thank you again, John. Thank you for the iNews report. It was eye-opening. Last night was an eye-opening event. I'm saddened by the events, and I think we need to keep everyone involved in our prayers as we move forward and move Colorado forward.
I received a note saying that some of you don't know who these people are. All right, so Mayor Michael Hancock, Councilman Albert Bill, Councilman Chris Herndon, State Senator Mike Johnson, State Representative Angela Williams, State Representative John Butler, State Representative Javon Melton, State Representative Ron Field, City Council President see if y'all pay attention. Former City Councilman and School Board Member, Happy May. Former Regents, Joe DeGuze, and School Board Member, Larry Taylor. We'll now go to John Butler.
I was actually hoping to be last in this group so that I could use all the information that's been forwarded to me by my colleagues on the stage. One of the advantages of being one of the older legislators is that I can connect our most recent past from the 60s to now and make some of those connections that allow us to know where we've been, how we got there, and what we need to do to overcome some of those things. I think that's an important aspect of what it is we do. I spent the last 40 years in K-12 education, and when I look back on my job, what I did most was protect my kids from a system that didn't support them. And so that I'm in the state legislature now because, quite frankly, I was enjoying my retirement, is because I want those systems that are intended to provide for our community to include the entire community. And so we have to get those agendas adjusted so that they attend to the needs of the inclusive community. And that's what this is about. That's what this report is saying, is that the systems that we have in place are causing the outcomes that we get. And there's lots of indications of things that interfere with our ability to be successful. But primarily, we get what we intend to from the systems that we set up. And so when the system says that it's failing youth of color in education, it's because the system is set up to cause when we change those systems, we will be able to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish in order to cause us to be more successful. When we talk about the family structure in the Black community, certainly I'm an advocate of, and have lived my life by that precept, that Black families are responsible for taking care of their family members. But we should not think that we're an exception. Families in America are mother, father, and children of original birth. So it's not like we're the only community that has issues around family structure, but the system still justifies for those other people more successful.
Right.
So I'm wanting us to pay attention to and get that agenda in place. We have to work on systemic changes that are necessary. By the way, I'm an educator. I told you I was an educator. We have to pass the changes in school finance. It's underfunded regardless of what it is that you're doing. And that underfunding results in significantly less attention being paid to kids of color and the needs of kids of color, because we're never been systemically the priority of the system. And so passing this and changing the funding mechanism from one that's based on real estate values to one that's based on income is a big deal. And I want to advocate for the passage of that, even though I work space. That's what happens when you don't do what you want to do. I don't think that whole list of people who came before us, who it's difficult being in the legislature today. It's not nearly as difficult as it was in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s to be out there on an island on your own. And so I want to thank all those elected officials that led the way for this community throughout the history of Colorado and everywhere else in this nation that work on these issues. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here and listening.
What's really interesting about it is that these next three legislators, John and two, these folks are all from the road. That's historic in itself. And we look forward to the meeting like this being held in Aurora, where we can be there.
Thank you so much, John. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I really want to thank iNews for putting together the report, because it sheds light on so many different subjects, and it helps us in so many of the misconceptions that are out there. As vice chair of the Black Legislative Caucus, I spent a lot of time these last few weeks dealing with some disparaging comments that were made by a state senator in a task force meeting about fried chicken and spent time eating vegetables. I want to thank Representative Bills for being here and having that. We can't expect to be able to live healthy lives if we're not living in healthy communities, healthy environments. And what I mean by that is if you look around you, look in the neighborhoods that you're in, you'll find that you may not have access to the things that are in other areas or other parts of town. If you look at Montbello and Green Valley Ranch, and I'm so glad that the report pointed out issues about health. If you look at Green Valley Ranch and Montbello, there are only 3 medical providers in that entire area, an area that has over 30,000 people. That's equivalent to a rural community in terms of healthcare and health provisions. If you look at access to healthy foods at grocery stores, you'll find that they're not in poor areas. If you're in North got a hospital, I've got 3 dozen healthcare providers, I've got 3 King Supers, 2 Safeways, 1 Sprouts, 1 Target, all in a very small geographic area. And until we can start to move forward and bring access, we're not going to be living healthy lives. We're going to be eating poorly and not getting checkups. We've got to continue to push forward the idea that our lives are more than just a marginal item that can be talked, about in a wrongful setting and interjected with fried chicken nuggets. And so we've got to, in the legislature, we've got to do more to promote health. We've been working very hard in supporting our president in the Affordable Health Care Act. And it was yesterday that the U.S. House, for the 41st time, voted to defund the Affordable Health Care Act. That can't take place. We've got to fight against that, push against that. And so, as Representative Williams had mentioned, having your voices, having your faces down in the Capitol to support us when we are asking for more to be done in our communities is critical, it's crucial. Otherwise, what the report shows will continue to happen for decades and generations. So, again, I thank you all for being here, and I thank so much the organizers of the event and the support.
Next speaker, on a personal note, said, I never want to do this. But we saw in her a flash of brilliance. We saw a mother who cared about her family. And we decided that in the midst of all that was going on, that if she would put her pain aside and take on the pain of the community to help us in that office, and we would get behind her, not only her, Angela, Yvonne, Tony, and others. So we're in the field, we're real proud of that.
Last night there was a shooting at a peace rally. My daughter was there, and she witnessed the shooting. And it was difficult for her because she saw someone get shot, not just once, not just twice. She tells me 5 times. So my heart aches because this shouldn't be happening at a peace rally. At a peace rally. Everyone has a right to their life, and to have someone take someone's life away with a gun is just really hard for me to understand. So I can relate to everyone's feeling because I feel kind of sad. But I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to be here today to talk about losing ground. I want to thank the Bailey's and the Colorado Black Roundtable for what you guys have been doing in the city for a very long time. It truly does take engagement. I mean, if you want better government, you have to be involved in it. If you want better funds, you're going to have to fight for it. At the State House, I am on a task force. It's called Economic Development and Poverty Reduction. The governor signed for us to be on this commission, and we're looking at poverty. In the state of Colorado, we're about 17% of the people in Colorado live in poverty. In Aurora, in Arapahoe County, we're at 23% poverty. In Denver, it's more like 17%. Getting up to about 18%. People are living in poverty. The district that I represent is on Colfax. Colfax and Yosemite is where my district starts. If you look on Colfax, you see poverty all day long. And when you live in poverty, it's almost like you're living in prison. Because you may not have walls around you, but you're constantly focused on food. And in this commission that I'm on, we were asked to take the SNAP challenge because the average pay you get for food stamps is $133 a month. That's $4.50 a day. So we were asked to see if we could live on And my whole focus was on food. Am I gonna have enough to eat? My whole focus is on food. And you heard this past week, at the federal level, they're talking about cutting, what, $4 billion from, 40 billion? $40 billion from food stamps. And when you talk about taking food stamps away from people, which would be millions of people, you're talking about how that's going to affect families, how it's going to affect women, and so there truly is a war on poverty. There is war on poor people. I see it down there at the state capitol, where we have people trying to run legislation that is anti-poor. With this new legislation that was passed, with this cutting of food stamps for our nation, they're going to require 20 hours per work week, and they're also going to require that you have drug testing. These are kinds of policies that we cannot tolerate in our state. So in this commission, we're trying to have a serious dialogue about what we can do to pull people out of poverty and into mainstream. And during this dialogue, we have people talking about children. Really. We have people saying that there's something wrong with Black people and using things like sickle cell anemia and being a diabetic. I should be able to work at the State House, not being in an environment that's so insensitive based on the color of our skin. We should not be talking about it. So we have 2 more meetings left on this task force, and I would like to invite Colorado Black Roundtable to come down to the commission and report to us the findings of what comes out of this today. Because I think that we need to, and the folks that are on that commission need to hear from our community in reference to what kinds of serious, good public policies we can do to help people get out of poverty. Because it's not easy. Once you lose your home, once you become unemployed, it's hard to get back on track. In Aurora, we have Children's Hospital. They have 300 jobs there. We have Ann Shute Center. They have over 500 job openings. And I see people on Colfax taking the 15, going all the way down to Denver to work because they don't have access to the jobs there. The reason they don't have access to the jobs there is because of the technical skills. That's why we do need to support Amendment 66. We need to make sure that our kids and those neighbors, my neighbors and my friends that live in that neighborhood can get jobs right in their own backyard, but they can't even get it. So when I think about minimum wage, and Javon Melton is going to be taking, Representative Melton is going to be taking this issue on. You're on minimum wage, and you have 2 kids. It's no way that changes relates to poverty. We do need to increase meaningful wages so that people can make a living. Because right now, if you're earning a minimum wage, it's hard to make it in this week. So thank you.
When my family first came here, one of the first people who reached out to the chair and myself was Hank and Joe and Mike and Mary. I became very close after I heard my wife speak together. Happy she's just an outstanding person. Today, she comes here after been on the city council for a year now. And like I said to Representative Shields, we're very proud of you. Girl, we're really proud of the work that you're doing in school.
Thank you to the Colorado Black Roundtable and CPWA and the other sponsors of this event, John, Sharon, you particularly, Regis and Gloria, for the work that you've done to really host this necessary community conversation. And in an honorable way, as others have mentioned, and like all of you today, I'm here with a heavy heart, but a renewed resolve. for what we've got to do going forward. And I don't want to repeat a lot of what many of my colleagues have already said, but just perhaps highlight a couple of those. And I see the role that we play as elected officials is many. One of those is, as our mayor likes to say, standing in the gap. Playing defense sometimes is what the role is that we play as elected officials. Over those things over which we don't have control, but we know that if we're not there standing in the gap, they'll roll over us. And so that is part of our role. Somebody talked about I think Alex, it was you that talked about the macro and the micro, and those are our roles. We have roles in policy where we're passing legislation, where we're looking at the 30,000-foot view, where we're working on issues around access to resources and how resources are allocated, and where we're looking at providing opportunity. But there's another part of our role. That's the partnership role with all of you in this community, and that's connecting those dots. Because all of the opportunities and all the legislation and all the policies in the world won't get us very far if we are not prepared from the community perspective. We're not prepared from the family perspective to take advantage. So you talked about the jobs that are out there, and in the high-tech arena, in the energy field, in the places where all of the jobs that provide living wages and high incomes in this state, Senator Johnson, you mentioned it, in less than 10 years, 70% of the jobs in this state are going to require post-secondary education. And so when I look at the report, and thank you, I'll pile on to, and my thanks to the INES Network. You know, our community already knew this stuff. They live it every day, they feel it, but it helps to put a name on it. It helps to paint a picture. It helps to focus our attention and our actions when we see a report like this that reflects what we know the people in our community are feeling already. And when I look at these numbers and the graphs, and the ones that should be going up and the ones that should be going the other direction, there's one thing that I think affects all of those, and that is the education of our children, and preparing them to succeed, preparing them not only to get jobs, but preparing them to create jobs in our communities, to be the job creators in our communities. And there's an inverse relationship. The higher the education, the higher the completion rate, the higher the number of our children that receive college degrees, and you saw the numbers, they're dismal in this state. We lag behind almost every state in this nation. Then the lower those poverty rates go in our community. So they are directly related. So I want to talk about, the video that we saw is a powerful image. Without words, it really painted a picture of the reality of the environment that so many of us face, that we face in our community. But I want to point out something that wasn't in that video, and it should be the focus of our attention in our community. Because what was missing in that video was Rachel Noel standing when that young lady first stopped at a place. And she said, "Sugar, it's okay. You can do this. You're smarter than that, and I'm going to help you." What was missing was Regis and Gloria and those that were mentioned before who were standing by that wall and said, "Don't stop here. You need to go around this wall." And that's how we come to where we are today. 6, to trying to create resources. We need to make sure that there are many more of us in the community standing there at the wall. The barbershop folks who are organizing the men. You need to get around that wall or over that wall. And so I just want to say that this is a challenge to us. I look at the progress we made in Denver Public Schools. We, cut the dropout rate in half, and that's good. But I want to know, when did dropping out of school become something that was acceptable in our community? That's something that happened. Where we are when it comes to setting the expectations, because I know all of us, when we were in school, it was unthinkable. You didn't even think about that school. And yet, we accepted. And so, part of the role that we have, in partnership with setting the policies and the legislation and trying to create the right environment, is to make sure that we're doing our part in our community, in our churches, in our families, in our organizations, to be there so that we can stand in those places and help all of our children recognize that they can overcome the obstacles, because we can't change all those obstacles. We're working on them, but we don't have control over all of that. But we do have control over preparing our kids to deal with those obstacles. Thank you.
Thank you to Colorado Life Roundtable. Also, thanks to Dr. Honorable Gloria Tanner who really have been the mentors in my life to understand what is really important in the field of our community and how to keep that moving. Just a little bit about this Northeast Denver school district that I am representing. In this school district, we have more schools in this district than any other district in Denver. And what does that mean? Especially here, because what we're going to end up with is about our house being on fire. What that means in this district is that more kids go to school hungry than any other district. What that means in this district is that more kids go from school to jail than any other district. What that means in this district is that there are more homes under foreclosure than any place else in the state. What that means in this district is that with our house on fire, we have a chance and a choice to make as we look at this report. Our chance and our choice is that we can stand on the sidelines and watch this house continue to burn. Or we can be like so many others that we stand on the shoulders of and run into the house, extinguish the fire, start building and taking the bricks and the mortar and the wood and putting this back together. And we cannot You know, and I applaud and I thank all of our representatives up here who are doing this incredible work. I mean, you read about it, you see it on TV, but that house on Broadway and Colfax, I mean, they're in there every day trying to put this fire out, put that fire out, build something great at the same time, having to put a fire out. But those are the policy things that we have to show up for. We have to run into the house of Colfax and Broadway and support them. We cannot have them be there unless we make sure we've got their back. Because funny things happen up there. Funny things that people start talking about. People that eat chicken. People that eat chicken. People that, you know. So let's be clear. We are here to move to action today because we have heard great information. We've seen information and facts, but we cannot take a time out anymore. Time out is over. Time out is over. Time for action. Join your neighbor. Join your children. Join your family. Let's all run into the house. Start building it back up. Thank you, John.
And these elected officials, the rest of us got to run in, try to save the children and the family. But in case you start the fire, you just continue to let the fire burn. And what do you do? And identify maybe the fire chief. So today, I'm trying to make sure that folks get the right to Colorado, the right to vote, the right to vote in time and fashion. We're trying to get a new fire chief. And that fire chief is going to be Joe Cruz. He's also the Board of Regents at the University of Colorado, and gentlemen who's going to help us know which house to go into so we don't go into the wrong house.
I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready to re-elect Landry Taylor to the school board. I think I want to mention two people, and Happy touched on this a moment ago. Gloria mentioned this when she started about an hour ago. It's not enough to have folks on our city council and on our school board and in the legislature. We need to make sure that we have representation at all levels of government. I'm only the second African American to serve on the Board of Regents at CU in almost 150 years of its existence, and the first was Rachel Noel, and she was. The second thing I want to do, and I know I'm not going to get too political, but my term ends in 15 months, and there will be no African Americans on the board unless we elect a young, talented woman out of Aurora, a black woman named Nikita Ricks, who is here in the audience. I do not want to be repetitive with my colleagues. They have already identified. I think to me, the losing ground report is staggering, as Happy mentioned. We already knew this was going on. And with respect to higher education, at least my perspective, having served on the Board of Regents for 5 years, it is astounding and it's a tragedy. You think about the number of African American students, the number of Latino students at the University of Colorado Boulder, the state's flagship institution. Those numbers having not changed since I was a student 10 years ago. At the end of the day, we have got to change it. And you all know that, I know that, the folks on this stage know that. It's not just retention, it's also recruitment. Councilman Herndon mentioned this on scholarships. We know what the problem is, right? I mean, there are talented young black kids here at Manual who do not go to our state's flagship institution because it's too expensive and because they're not getting scholarships. In other states, if you look at the empirical data, they are doing far better because they are investing. We had a problem at our medical school at
at CU out on the road at the Ancients campus several years ago, where the accrediting agency, the national accrediting agency, took us to task and said we did not have enough African American and Latino and minority students to become doctors in our community. We invested money, scholarship money, and lo and behold, what happens? We get more students, more talented minority students. We are working on retention, and as was mentioned, we're making progress at CU Boulder, but I would say it's not a coincidence that we're 48th in the nation, 48th, 49th usually, in public funding for higher education, and we have such astoundingly low rates of both retention and enrollment with respect to minority students. We have got to change the way in which we see higher education in the state of Colorado as a public and a community good. And the first step to doing that is passing Initiative 66 this fall, which will do a lot for K-12. The final thing I want to mention, John touched on this. We really do stand on the shoulders. I think I'm probably the youngest guy on stage. We stand on the shoulders. Yeah, they're looking at us. Mayor Hancock's looking at me funny. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We have not had a Democratic statewide candidate since Regis Roth ran for lieutenant governor almost 30 years ago. I'm running for Secretary of State right now, the office currently held by Scott Preston. If you want to talk about losing ground, the common thread to all of this, our ability to improve educational opportunities for our kids, our ability to restore and to change income inequalities in our community, is all tied together by our ability to participate in our democracy by exercising our right to vote. And that right has been under attack across the country. You saw it with the Supreme Court's decision just 4 months ago with respect to the Voting Rights Act. You see it in North Carolina, in Texas with voter ID laws. We have got to be vigilant about protecting our right to vote so that we can continue to have the great representation that we have in our community. So thank you, John. Thank you, Sharon. What you all are doing is so important, and I'm just so humbled to be a part of your community and helping you your cause.
Issues real quick. Joe mentioned the young lady who's going to be running to replace him. But we also talk about Carl and my who also running to add on to the Two, each one of these people, but they represent black folks throughout the state. And we learned that when they were just Regis and Gloria and a few others in the state. Thirdly, politics is not just about politics. It's about politics, programs, but also about personality. And when you get down there, you learn about the personality that's there. Fourth, a question to each one of you, and I just did a show of hands. Can the round table count on each one of you in your office as we move forward to lose the government force? Can I say so? Thank you. I missed nobody in acknowledging all the elected officials you before, and I gotta make sure I